And we can see some good numbers popping up in the audience just now, which is great to see. So I think we've given people as much time as they probably need to join this session. So what we'll do is we'll start off now, and hopefully everyone else who wants to join will join imminently. So once again, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to webinar 4 of New Verve Presents Atlassian in Scotland, our annual Atlassian in Scotland webinar series. My name is Kris, I'm head of ops at New Verve, and today I'll be hosting the webinar for you. Before we kick off, just a little bit of housekeeping to start off with. So you'll know if you've attended these sorts of webinars before that we'll have a Q&A running throughout. And you will see a Q&A box appear in the stage area on the right-hand side of your screen. So feel free to pop any questions into the Q&A box. And if you're lucky, one of our team members or our attendees might answer that question for you whilst the webinar is ongoing. Don't worry if they don't, because we will have a dedicated Q&A section at the end of the webinar where we'll go through the questions with our guests and try and answer them all. If we don't get the chance to answer your question, again, don't worry. We will make sure to answer it offline, and we'll follow up with answers to existing questions after the webinar. We'll also have a couple of quick polls running throughout the webinar at certain key points. Again, you'll see them pop up on that right-hand side of your screen under the polls section. We'll prompt you for your feedback when these polls do pop up, so keep an eye for them. Our marketing team will also be keeping an eye on the polls, the Q&A, and any comments which might pop in throughout the session. So do keep an eye out for them. You might see them pop up here and there. I think that's it in terms of housekeeping. So without further ado, let's get on with the webinar. Just a quick reminder, we are New Verve Consulting, Atlassian's #1 gold solution partner in Scotland, and our mission is to inspire effective teamwork. Today it's our absolute pleasure to host Raj Sehmi from Refined and Randeep Mann from Kantar, who will be taking us through Refined and the migration paths available for Refined when moving to cloud, as well as Kantar's own journey to cloud. Before we get started, just a very quick poll, the first poll of the day. Have you ever actually used Refined, the app Refined, to create a branded site? Answer 1, yes, I already use it and love it. Answer 2, I have plans to. And answer 3, no, tell me more. If you would like to hear more about Refined, if you're new to the tool, do not hesitate to reach out, and we will make sure to put you in touch with the relevant people. So we'll keep that poll up maybe for another 30 seconds to make sure that we get some answers. And in case you've just joined, the first poll of the day as part of this webinar, have you ever used Refined, the app, to create a branded site? Yes, no, or maybe you're aware of the app, but you have plans to use it. And we can see that the votes are heavily slanted towards yes. So we have some fans here on the webinar, which is great. But there's also a couple of people that are interested in the product but haven't used it themselves, which is great. We'll make sure to reach out to you once we're done. I think with that, let's launch into the first talk. So again, it's our pleasure to welcome Raj Sehmi here, Customer Success Specialist at Refined. And Raj will go over Refined's migration path and the options that are available to you as a customer. So hi, Raj, welcome.
Thanks a lot, Kris. All right, so it's very interesting to hear that people in the webinar today have already used Refined and that there's some interest in starting to use Refined. That's super cool to hear. So thank you everyone for joining us today. Special thanks to Kris and Lauren and New Verve for the invitation to speak. My name is Raj. I work in customer success at Refined. I'm closing in on 4 years with Refined this year. I started out in support and then I transitioned to customer success later on. So I've always worked quite hands-on with our products and how they're used, and of course helping customers along with their implementations. It's quite an adventure. I really enjoy it. And today I'm going to share some insights on migrating to cloud with Refined, what it entails, and what to expect on the cloud platform. So I'll start off with a short introduction to Refined. I'll talk a bit about who we are, what we do, for those that might not be super familiar with us. We'll take a look at some of the key considerations regarding our server and cloud products, what works the same, what works differently, and set the expectations before migrating. And then we'll talk a bit about the actual migration, how to go about it, what you should think about, and how you could think about it. And finally, the fun part, I'll show you some cool examples of customer sites built using Refined on Cloud. Hopefully this is also a good segue into Kantar's presentation. And maybe someday, with their permission, I might be showing off their site as a really good cloud example. So who is Refined and what do we do? We're a product company and we make a site building tool called Refined. We started out more than 10 years ago. The initial Refined app was a theming app for Confluence Server. Today, we're 29 people in both Malmö and Helsinki, and we're fully dedicated on making our site builder. The last 5 years, we've been focusing a lot on data center and cloud, of course. And as many of you are probably aware, the ball game on cloud is quite different compared to server, which has meant that we've needed to use a different technology to build on cloud as compared to what we started out with on server. And this has meant a lot of new possibilities on cloud that's allowed us to further expand our offering. Our cloud apps currently have more than 3,000 installs, and we're still growing. And we recently hit the milestone of 1,500 Refined for Cloud sites built by our customers. So we're thankful to all our customers for trusting us as a stable site building tool. Some examples of customers trusting Refined sites. We have, for example, NASA, who use us for documentation. We've got Airbnb, who run an ITSM internal support site. Klarna, who's a Swedish fintech giant, they also use us for internal support. And lots more for other use cases. But what is Refined really? What is the site building tool? So it's a tool that's available on both cloud and on-prem. So on-prem is server and data center for Confluence, and also for Jira and JSM. So this encompasses Jira Service Management and Jira Software and Core. So the key things that Refined sites allow you to do, you can organize your Confluence and Jira content and create an easy to navigate structure for this Atlassian content. The sites are quick and easy to set up and easy to customize as well. So it allows admins the freedom to make content accessible to the end users. And you can make unlimited sites based on one Refined instance. So make Confluence and Jira essentially into something for any user group, internal or external. And of course, the Refined sites provide the opportunity to create branded and engaging solutions that can be used and appreciated by both technical and non-technical end users. I'll touch a bit on the key features in Refined that are available across cloud and on-prem. Firstly, we have the structure and organization aspects. This includes the ability to group the Atlassian content into easy to navigate categories, and then furthermore add these into sites. This goes hand in hand with permissions, so who is allowed to view the sites, and also admin delegation. So it's allowing licensed Atlassian users who might not be Atlassian admins access to administer Refined and aspects of the Refined app. And the second group of key features is the look and feel aspect. So this includes theming. This is built within the app theme editor. And then we've got layouts, which are the landing pages on the sites that you build, and modules, which are the building blocks basically for the layouts, for the landing pages. So let's talk a bit about the key similarities and differences between Refined on Server and Refined on Cloud. Let's start off with the underlying infrastructure. So on server and data center, for both Refined for Jira and Refined for Confluence, the app is deployed directly on the base Atlassian platform. So when you enable it globally, it acts as a skin on the default Confluence instance or on the default JSM Help Center, but it's on the same URL that the native instance is accessed on. You have the possibility, of course, of creating secondary sites with Refined and not using it globally. So with this option, the secondary sites are themed with Refined, and then you can choose what spaces and projects to add to these sites, while the main Confluence is unthemed. But all of the sites you create here will still stem from the native Atlassian instance. So the URLs here will be extensions of the Confluence base URL. Cloud, as mentioned, it's a different ballgame. So we couldn't provide our entire feature scope on the default Atlassian Cloud instance in the same way. We needed to find another way around this. Our solution was to develop a SaaS app. So Refined for Cloud is essentially a software as a service. And then we have integration apps for both Confluence and for Jira. This allows us to provide the same functionality as we can on server on the cloud side. And we can allow our users to then create sites and group Atlassian content within the sites and provide the same look and feel features that I've touched on before. This setup has also opened a lot of doors for us and given us a lot more freedom in how our sites function. And I'll go more into this soon in this presentation. But first, I'd like to take a moment to compare the deployments a bit more. And to start with, talk a bit about the similarities between cloud and the on-prem versions of Refined. The key feature scope is the same. So the organizational aspect that we talked about before with the multiple sites and adding content into those sites, and also the look and feel aspect. So the layouts, which are the landing pages and modules to build them up, and the theming aspect. On the other side of the coin, the key differences between the deployments that are useful to know, especially when thinking about migration, include the following. Firstly, the underlying infrastructure and the differences with this. As we've talked about, cloud is a separate SaaS, and on-prem is an app that's deployed on the same base platform. And this sort of leads us into a parallel universe setup. So on cloud, Refined does not replace the native Confluence or the native JSM Help Center, as we do on server, but rather these exist simultaneously, parallel to each other, and both are accessible with their own separate URL. This setup also means that the creation of content in Confluence, that works a bit differently on cloud as compared to server. Confluence content on cloud with Refined, it's created and edited in the native Confluence UI and then exposed on the Refined side, and it's fetched dynamically on behalf of the user that's viewing it. For the JSM part on cloud, it is of course possible to create requests directly from the Refined UI, the same as you do on server, so that's not as much of a difference. The big advantage of cloud, running our own SaaS parallel to the Atlassian Cloud, has meant that a lot of things that we can't do on server are possible to do on cloud. One of these is custom domains. As mentioned, you can create multiple sites on cloud and then populate these with content from Confluence and Jira. And on each of these sites, you can have your own unique custom domain added to it. So you have one Atlassian Cloud instance running multiple Refined sites, and each of the Refined sites can have its own unique custom domain. The parallel SaaS setup has also given us a lot more flexibility with what we can do. So we're entering exciting new territory with this. For example, on cloud, you can combine Confluence and Jira content together on the same Refined site in a much more integrated way as compared to what we can do on-prem, where the two platforms function a bit more separately. You can add a Confluence space and a Jira project into the same Refined site, and then use modules containing Jira content and Confluence content on the same landing page or layout. It's also possible to include the same space or same project on separate Refined sites on the cloud side. So essentially, you can serve different end users with the same content from Atlassian in different themed sites, different customized sites, complete with their own custom domain and URL, all the while managing the base content in Atlassian in one place. The reason I'm sharing these similarities and differences between the cloud and on-prem platforms is to share some perspective on the mindset that can be adopted when migrating to cloud. Due to the increased flexibility, you have the potential to do a lot more. For example, when you're migrating an intranet from Confluence plus Refined on server to cloud, the cloud side has the possibility to integrate directly with JSM. So you can embed the HR service desk or an IT service desk directly on the intranet, and then build landing pages like my example here that contain both resources or policy documents from Confluence, that's what I have on the right side of this screen, and JSM request types, which I have on the left, all on the same landing page. The same applies for migrating, for example, a JSM support site from server to cloud, which is what we did with our own support, This is the cloud version that we've now migrated. On server, you could leverage the project to knowledge base connection that Atlassian provides and surface content from Confluence to your customers. And this can be done in the same way on cloud, but you can take it a step further by adding the space directly into the site and then using the modules we provide to enhance the self-service aspect and make the site even more useful for the end users. On the same note, I also have a first look example here of a recently released feature that brings this integration even closer on our cloud platform. So we've now released functionality where you can embed a request type straight on a Confluence page in the refined render, of course. And then the end user can create requests directly from this context. They don't need to navigate away. They're viewing the Confluence page, and then they can click to add a request. And once they create that, then you're taken to the request context. All right, so in this next section, we'll now talk a bit about the actual migration of Refined, what this entails, and how you could go about the same. To start with, the Atlassian content that is needed to build out the Refined sites, this is migrated as you normally would, using the migration assistance for Confluence and Jira provided by Atlassian, or by exporting the projects and spaces from the on-prem and importing on cloud. Basically, the base content coming from Atlassian, you would migrate it exactly as you would if Refined wasn't involved. From the Refined side, currently, due to the infrastructural differences, it isn't possible to directly migrate your configuration from on-prem to cloud and vice versa. So you need to do the setup or recreate the setup rather manually. The individual parts to think about here are the site structure, so what you've put in the site builder. This builds out your navigation on your sites as well, and I'll touch a bit more on this quite soon. Both cloud and server contain an in-product theme editor, so you can recreate the theme. The cloud version might be a bit more powerful since it's got a couple of options like inbuilt fonts that aren't available on server out of the box just yet. And then, of course, the layouts and the modules, so the landing pages. The manual recreation, it does present an opportunity in itself to reorganize, rethink, refocus on the end user, and using the flexibility, introduce new ways of combining Confluence and Jira together once you do migrate. So here's a head-to-head comparison of the site builder in an example site that I migrated. On the left side, you have the server version, and on the right side is the cloud. It's relatively quick and painless, depending on how much content you have on your sites, of course. But the site structuring works exactly the same. So on the left side, in the server screenshot, I have a Teams parent item, and under that, I've got a sales and marketing sub-item and 4 spaces under that. And if we look on the right-hand screenshot, I've been able to recreate the exact same. The Teams parent item, the sales and marketing under that, and then the 4 spaces as they were on server. And the structure you add in here, it results in your top-level navigation on your site. And this is what that looks like. So on the left side, it's the server screenshot. The right side is cloud. As you can see, I've been able to replicate the same on both platforms. There are a couple of aesthetic differences in the header, for example, but other than that, it's pretty much the same site. It's a replica. And the same for the theme and the landing page itself. So the left is server and the right is cloud. I was evidently logged in with different users when I did this. But as you can see, I've been able to recreate the exact same thing, regardless of platform. So I'll talk a bit about some tips that you can think about if you're migrating and how to go about it. So with the current lay of the land, given that you need to do the restructuring and so on cloud again, I'll share some points that might be useful to consider and to have in mind. So firstly, it's an opportunity to evaluate the existing setup that you have on server, especially if it's been in place for a long time, and try and improve it when you move to the cloud instance. So you can evaluate what is working well, what's not working well, what is legacy content and isn't maybe in use anymore, and try and do away with that. And then given the flexibility of integration on cloud, how can you take advantage of this and leverage the parallel universes to better serve the end users? For example, on server, if you have a separate documentation site and a separate customer support site, you can consider combining these into one when you go on cloud, since you can add the spaces and the service desk on the same site. Or you can keep them separate, but still integrate aspects of each other on them by adding in, for example, request types on pages in the documentation to allow easy access to support. The parallel universe setup, it gives you so much more flexibility in deciding if, when, and how to combine and to reuse content from the different Atlassian spaces and projects that you have existing already. And speaking of the base platforms, a key consideration to make when you're migrating is to prepare this in the best way possible. So remember that Refined is the presentation layer. The content itself is coming from Confluence and coming from Jira. So it's key to ensure that this is optimized. And migrating is an opportunity to take a look at this and think a little bit about, for example, in Confluence, what can you merge into a single space? And if you have spaces that are overflowing with content, what can you split up into separate spaces? You can evaluate the state of your service management projects. If you have a setup, for example, that's grown out of hand and you have way too many request type groups in a single project, for example, maybe think about splitting those up. Take a look at how you can improve what you have, analyze what could be done away with, what could be introduced, and identify improvement opportunities at this level. Finally, a good tip is to start with an MVP, so the minimum viable product. It's incredibly easy to roll out on cloud, given the parallel setup, so Refined will not affect the base Atlassian instance and the content there. So you can take that as an opportunity to come up with what could be the easiest aspects to start with on Refined, roll that out first, and then continue to iterate as you go forward. For example, you can start with a Refined site for a simpler use case, such as documentation, or one aspect of your service management, maybe HR support, and then use that to evaluate and gather feedback from relevant stakeholders and utilize that when you're building out secondary Refined sites that might have more complex use cases, such as an intranet site, for example. All right, in this final section, I'll show you a couple of customer examples that are built using Refined for Cloud. So we start off with Gruntify and their site. They're based in Australia, and they make software that helps insurance and maintenance teams manage field inspections, reporting, and logistics. The site is a help center that has some knowledge base articles, FAQs, and you can also contact support here. And what we like here is the simplicity. They have a really nice supersized search. They've got some icons that help you to navigate and a minimalist header and footer. The minimalist approach, it prevents information overload, and it's achieved with these few design decisions that they've made. Next, we have Spot On. They're based in San Francisco, and they make software and payment solutions for businesses. They've got a customer help center with product instructions, onboarding guides. You can contact support and other resources. And as we can see, they have a branded search here as well. They've got modules optimized for nav and a very consistent design across their site with the same sort of layout with the navigation items and so on. And my last example for today, this is from San Francisco-based Bridge. Their platform and services help businesses manage immigration processes for employees. So their Refined site is a place where customers can access critical immigration-related legal information, as well as product instructions, updates, forms, and so on. It's a very news-centric site, news-centric feed. You can quickly access key forms, and they've built a custom-coded navigation item at the top. For this site, there's no gimmicks, no flashy images. It's just straight-up information from Confluence served to their end users in quite an easy-to-consume format. And that wraps it up for my presentation. So back to Kris.
That's awesome. Thanks very much, Raj. it was very interesting to see the product in action as much as possible, and also to hear about the different opportunities and challenges that the different deployment models present. I know it's been quite an active conversation within the ecosystem about the whole move to cloud, and as you've shown us, it does create some challenges, but it also creates a lot of opportunity there for vendors. So thanks very much for presenting the app. Refined is fantastic, and we heartily recommend it.
Thank you, Kris.
And then moving on from here, before we carry on with the next talk of the day, just a very quick poll for everyone. So ahead of Kantar's story about where and how they migrated to cloud, we wanted to hear about your migration journey. So where are you on your cloud migration journey? You might be in the research and assessment stage, so the very early stage of your journey. You might be preparing to migrate. You might be ready, so basically, just waiting for the green light to crack on. You might already be actively migrating, might be in the middle of the migration process, or you might have fully migrated. So as this is a webinar series focused on cloud migration, we'd love to hear about where you are in your migration journey. And again, we'll probably give people maybe another 30 seconds to submit some responses from the side. We're seeing a good mix of answers just now, but the dominating ones, if you like, are actively migrating. So we have some votes from people who are actively migrating to cloud, and we have some votes from people who are currently preparing to migrate. And again, if you're interested in any guidance or assistance in the journey to cloud, or if you'd just like to brainstorm some ideas, feel free to reach out to us. I think we'll wrap up there and we'll move on to the second talk now. So without further ado, it's our absolute pleasure to welcome Randeep from Kantar. Randeep will talk us through the customer migration experience and what it was like for Kantar as an organization.
Okay. Thank you, Kris. I'll just try to take over the presentation. Okay, I think you can see my presentation. Okay, so thank you firstly for having me. My name is Randeep Mann. I am an IT Liaison Executive at Kantar. I've been at Kantar for 14 years, and I started out as a second-line support analyst, later becoming a IT business improvement agent, and continuing on to do projects that included rolling out ITSM, and this is where Jira and Verve come in. So just a bit of background around Kantar. So we are a research business. We are an agency that has 25,000 people around the globe giving us information where we're able to ask them questions and do very real deep insights into the market and provide that unbiased information to our clients. We operate around the world, and we do all sorts of types of research in many different industries. With ITSM, we've got now two versions. The one that I worked on, internally facing, is something that we've developed using Jira software, Confluence, and service management. And it was something that we wanted to drive ourselves. So it was something that was very much locally driven, locally recommended, and we worked together to build up that solution. I'll later on also talk about our new externally facing ITSM, which is built up on our internal experience to then release this to be available to our clients. So being here for 14 years, I've very much seen very many different types of systems that we've deployed to being able to deliver our services. So emails, macros, internal tools. We've got lots of internal experts, and we've all created ad hoc solutions. Different teams will do things their own way, and very slowly you build up a big repository where you need to train people up for quite a bit of time so they can get the right help from the right people. And you got a lot of individuals maybe not spending a huge amount of their time, but they're constantly tinkering away, improving, bug fixing, and so over a fair amount of hours are being spent by development keeping these tools up to date. And one of the big bugbears is doing your metrics, so reporting back to your managers on how the teams are performing, and you're spending many hours. So coming together, we came up with the idea of using Jira Service Desk. This was on-prem, and it was something that we recommended to our managers, and we started pushing through. We recognized that it was an industry level software. It was something that was professional. We could see it online, and we were able to deploy it internally. The challenges were it will still be reliant on internal infrastructure, and some of the and that infrastructure would require internal support. It was something that wasn't quite seamless because of that internal support, internal infrastructure. We've had challenges with some of that stability, but we were already up to 100 licensed users, supporting 650 internal users. And it was something that was rapidly growing, as it was something that did prove its worth versus what we've been using before. But without a huge amount of internal experience, it was something that didn't have a huge amount of planning or control. So again, there was still some levels of ad hoc differences between different teams, but it was something that where the platform, Jira, gave us a level of consistency and a level of performance. That was something that we really desired. But there were still challenges with that internal infrastructure. So our corporate strategy, like with many companies, was to move to the cloud, and Jira had a cloud version. There was also a focus on freeing up our developers to be able to do more client work, to do more client-centric, agile development. And so moving away from ad hoc, small-scale developments into much more professional, big teams. So there was a combination of how do we move on to the cloud, how do we reduce our reliance and risk on internal development and support, and also moving towards using external expertise and skills and leveraging their skills that would go beyond what we could produce. We wanted to continue to use the softwares, Jira Software, Jira Service Management, and Confluence. We wanted it to be a really trusted solution. So with our current solution, while the platform was stable, the underlying infrastructure did have issues. It did have downtime, and if there was support required, the internal teams would take time. And so there was a real focus on how could we have something that just was available, that didn't require teams to be working on it, didn't require downtime. And so moving on to the cloud using Atlassian's software as a service was a very big objective. Moving with, so this is where we leveraged New Verve and leveraged their managed migration service. They were able to provide project management for the migration. They were able to capture all of the information that we required. They very much freed our team to not having to get too involved with this as much as possible. And we worked on planning a soft launch before fairly quickly migrating off our current solution. So to ensure that the migration went as smoothly as possible, even though we'd only been running our on-prem solution for a little over a year, it already turned into something that had become quite a lot of data, a lot of tickets, a lot of project information. So there was a lot of information that we wanted to transfer, but there'd also been a lot of configuration. Different individuals had done different things. And so as a way of preventing the project from being delayed, we very much prioritized which elements were important to us, which were not, and to sacrifice some of the configuration changes we'd made so that we could be on time, be on budget, and really prioritize what was important to us. The other key thing is to look at iterative development. So our intention was once we did migrate, we wanted to focus on, okay, now that we've got a slightly cleaner slate, we've got some experience under our belt, how can we do this in a better way? We focused on reacting to feedback, reacting to internal customers, and seeing what they wanted, and then gradually building up our solution again in a slightly more controlled way. Always focusing on confidence building, ensuring that the service was providing value for money. We were able to prove that the money being spent on the project was something that we wanted, that would enhance the service we provide, and also to help with this, the internal metrics were really powerful, very visual, very easy, always live, and the feedback has always been very strongly positive. So moving on to what we're doing right now. So while we have a maturing ITSM, we're in the process of developing a new one. Off the back of the experience and the positive feedback, we're now leveraging add-ons, including Refined, to create a new solution where our new products have a far more professional support behind them. There will be a website. This is a screenshot of what it will look like, which is again powered by Refined, and it will allow us to be able to support our customers and the products that they're paying for. We want to be deploying best practice, so ITIL 4. More of the team are being trained on it. There is this has now become a globally directed project in terms of using Jira, using Refined, and it is thanks to being trusted that we are continuing to develop what we are doing and continuing to prove that this is the best direction for our company and for our clients. I'm very much a supporter of Refined's tag of single point of truth, of really simplifying all of the different areas of support into as little and simplistic navigation as possible. There is still a lot of places you still need to go for support, and it's something that we're continuing to develop in how we can simplify what we do. And we've been able to integrate many of our Jira projects covering different regions into a single place. And the massive focus is on client experience, ensuring that they will raise their tickets, ensuring that they will ask for help, and ensuring that we then deliver on what they want and as quickly as possible. So that's my presentation. So thank you. I'll be available for the questions later. So yeah, thank you for your time.
That's fantastic. Thanks very much, Randeep. It was very exciting to see an organization of this scale going through this journey, and especially making these tough decisions around what to migrate, what not to migrate. What are the pros and cons? It was good to hear that you were excited about this journey. So with that in mind, we'd like to hear from the rest of the attendees here to see what excites you about the journey to the cloud. What are you most excited about? Is it the increase in speed? Is it the reduced administrative costs, data safeguarding, increased collaboration or innovation? Is it staying up to date with new features and versions? Is it improved look and feel? So have your pick. Have a pick and let us know what excites you the most. And just a quick overview of where we are with results to the poll. The most excitement seems to be generated by staying up to date with new features and versions. But there's also people that are excited about increased collaboration, innovation, improved look and feel, and reduced administrative costs. So interestingly enough, data safeguarding and increased speed doesn't seem to be that big a concern for people, which is I suppose a good thing. But I think with that in mind, we'll move on to the final portion of our webinar, which is the Q&A section. So thanks very much again to both of our guests for your wonderful presentations. It was great to hear from you both. I think we can all come back on cam here and move on to the Q&A. On the right-hand side of the screen in the stage area under the Q&A tab, you'll find all the questions that have come in thus far. And I guess we'll just take them from the top. So what feature of Refined do our guests think is the most underutilized feature of Refined? I suppose Raj might be a good starting point for you to take this one away. So the most underutilized feature of Refined that could improve implementation or adoption of the tool. Go for it.
Very interesting question. The first thing that I can think of is the admin delegation feature. So essentially, you can delegate out as the Confluence or Jira admin, make another licensed user Refined admin, or you can also delegate it out to a user group. And that way you could, for example, if you want your design team to actively build the sites and to make it look really good, then make them Refined administrators and don't take on that responsibility as the Atlassian admin. That, and I'm also going to say sites is one of our key features, and that's one of the main things we bring to the table, and it is heavily used by our customers. But I think it can be, the potential that it brings to the table is even more powerful than what a lot of customers realize. So for example, you might pick Refined and start out for building one sort of site to fill one purpose or one use case. But it's so easy with that concept to be able to serve different use cases, different user groups with multiple sites. And as mentioned, keep the content in one place and manage it in one place.
That's very interesting. Thanks, Raj. And I suppose a hint to anyone who hasn't tried out these features yet, would encourage you to do so. What about you, Randeep? In terms of your experience, Kantar's experience with Refined thus far, are there any areas that you haven't maybe fully explored, but you're thinking about exploring that could make the solution even better?
So I think looking at what we're trying to do is still in pre-release. We haven't yet got the feedback from our clients, so very much we'll be interested in hearing what they say, how easy it is to navigate. It is a balancing act of trying to create something that is simple, but also capturing all of the various teams and directing what we want. I'm also quite keen to look at how we can utilize the platform to be more useful internally. So a lot of people who join our company, it takes them time to understand where to go. So if we can create something that is helps them on board a little bit more quickly by giving them a single place to go, that would be quite an interesting development. So it's very much, I think, we very much want to play with Refined and how best to get that value out of it and to get the best experience out of our ITSM.
Sounds great. Good luck with that. I'll pick out another question here. There's a question which is probably more specific to Raj, but Raj, if you want to take this one, is there any plans to make the migration path from server to cloud automated? I'm guessing this refers to the app, so let's interpret it that way. Or is this not possible because of the different deployment models or other reasons?
Yeah, so the current limitation with the migration path or the current manual migration path, it's basically because of the underlying infrastructure. So there isn't a good way as of now for us to export the entire Refined configuration and then move it to cloud. But that being said, we have a big focus on trying to make this, or trying to improve the migration path and make it a bit smoother in any way that we can going forward. And one of the things that we're exploring, I can't give an ETA because it's still investigative. We're exploring being able to export, to start with, at least your themes and layouts that you've created on server or data center, on premise, and then import these on cloud. Currently, you can't do that, but that is one of the first steps that we want to implement in order to make this better.
That's very interesting. Thanks for that. Another question here, and let's ask it to both our guests. And maybe I'll pick Randeep first to tackle this one. You've obviously touched on that in your presentation, but the difference in deployment between server and cloud, in your experience, has that made a noticeable change to the end user experience? And if so, what has been the feedback for that from the end users?
So this is very much about the cloud is the platform plus Atlassian's infrastructure, while on-prem is Atlassian software, but on Kantar's infrastructure. So the biggest difference is around the infrastructure, the support around it, and the reliability and some of the challenges that we've had. So while we've been very happy with the application itself, the stability of the solution was still a big challenge. And so downtime was very much noticed. It would impact the team. There was no plan B. So with an ITSM, that is the only way we want people to be reaching out to different development teams. And if it's down, then you cause a small degree of chaos internally. But the biggest user experience is uptime, is availability, being able to see your tickets, being able to talk between different teams. The cloud very much has given us that ability, and given the company that confidence. And I think that's the big difference.
Fantastic, thanks for that. And Raj, for you, the same question, but maybe from a slightly different angle. From your end user research, do you see any feedback from users in terms of that difference between how Refined works in server versus cloud, and any kind of notable changes that makes to the user experience? Obviously, again, you've touched on that in your presentation, but maybe from the end user research side of things, you might have any more insight here to offer.
So coming from the user or the UX experience for the end user that's consuming content, if I'm consuming Confluence content, then the end user experience isn't that different from server to cloud. For most of our customers that have migrated and used both platforms, if the end user is consuming the content, then they don't really notice that much of a change because of how similar the feature scope is. The key difference is if the end user is a content creator, especially on Confluence, because they're on server, then everything is being done in the same on the same instance, basically. But then on cloud, you have Refined as the presentation layer and the content coming or being created rather in Confluence. So then you need to sort of go back and forth a little bit. So that's the key, like the key difference that I've heard about, at least.
Yeah, makes sense. Absolutely, we've come across that as well. So it's interesting to hear that's the key difference that you've identified too. And I'll put you on the spot here again with the next question. From your experience working with the tool, maybe even implementing the tool, what sorts of design or usability kind of best practice would you consider or should be considered when putting Refined in front of the Atlassian tools as the presentation layer, as you said?
So one of the key, it's difficult to give a best practice that fits everyone's needs because that's very organizational, that's very specific to what the organization's needs are. But what I would say here is take a look at the content that you have, for example, in Jira, in Confluence, and identify what is important, or what is not what is important, but what needs to be easily accessible. And then utilize, for example, the modules that we provide in our tool and bring that content to the forefront. Because essentially what we're trying to do with our app is to take the great functionality that's on the base Atlassian tools and try to make the content that you have there even more accessible, even more usable for users that might not be totally comfortable in those, like in the UI that's provided natively. So I don't know if that answered the best practice question, but it's a bit like, it's very subjective.
Yeah, no, that does make sense, and I suppose your tips are still very applicable, and so it's good to hear. It's good to hear from the perspective of the person on the inside, and I'll pass this on to Randeep as well. From your experience working on the end user side of things and the person looking after this deployment. Have you had any feedback from users, perhaps? Have you had any considerations from yourselves or working with us in terms of design or usability sort of best practices that were either key for you when you were implementing the solution or that you wish you had considered?
So I think it's been very, very important that we keep close to our customers. It's been very much something that has been driven through feedback from our old systems pre Jira and then moving on to Jira. So the reason that we were able to get a budget together is because of negative feedback around tickets being lost through email strings, things being very slow. And so moving on to an ITSM was very much something that the business wanted. And then it was a case of, okay, talking to each individual team that was on the ITSM, how do they want to operate? So we did create solutions that tied into what the local objectives were for each team. And each of our tickets has a 5-star rating at the end of it once the ticket is closed, and it has verbatim. And we very much look at that and we try to figure out, okay, is that something that is an issue that is to an individual or broader to the system? And it is a case of constantly looking to make small improvements, and to make the site as useful and as friendly and as quick as possible, so that they don't have to revert to using emails or other systems, which there's nothing stopping them doing. But if we can make our ITSM as easy as possible, then that's where they will go.
I think that's a very interesting angle, bringing customer satisfaction reporting into this and using that as the kind of continuous improvement standard to measure against, really, bringing that into your design. So thanks a lot for that. Raj, are there any refined resources that you can point to that will provide our attendees here and other users with better knowledge on how to make the UX within the tools smoother and more user-friendly?
So one of the resources that I can point out is our blog. It's on our website, so refined.com/blog. There's a lot of content on there with, for example, case studies of how customers have built out their sites that you can take inspiration from. Also, some guides on what we would recommend if you're building, for example, a knowledge site or an intranet, how you can think about going about that. And without sounding too much like an influencer, there's also our YouTube channel that has some video content in terms of guides and so on that might be useful. And of course, our partner network, such as Verve. I would recommend reaching out to one of them, and they can definitely help you along with how to make the UX even better using our tools.
Sounds great. Thanks very much. And final question for both our guests. Randeep, what's your favorite aspect of Refined and why?
I think it's very much the focus on the customer experience, on making it as easy as possible. It's looking at what has Jira already done. It's not replacing Jira, it's just creating a layer in front of Jira. And it's trying to think about, okay, what is it that the customer really wants to see on that very first page? How many clicks do they really want to be clicking to get to that form or that place that they want to be filling in? So I really, I think that's the big one for me, is their focus purely on the customer experience.
Super. And Raj, from your perspective? Yeah, I'm agreeing with Randeep very much. Like, I've heard countless stories of users trying to find a way to just make Confluence and Jira, for example, to start with look better, but then finding out the entire scope of Refined and how you can make content so easily accessible. So the structuring, the organization, and so on. So I'd have to say, like, without echoing Randeep too much, that's my favorite aspect.
Sounds good. Makes sense. I guess that's our favorite aspect as well. Obviously, there is so much you can do with this tool that it's difficult to pick your favorite, and it will vary from implementation to implementation. But just the focus on making the presentation layer a feature in itself, a fully featured capability that you can customize to your needs. I think that's the strongest point of the app from that perspective. Thank you very much again, both, for your participating in this Q&A, and thank you very much for all our guests for posting all these very interesting and insightful questions. We hope you have a fabulous day. Before we go, just a final poll to bring up for everyone. This is just for the webinar itself. On a scale of 1 to 10, let us know how likely it is that you'd recommend this series to your colleague. But with that, I'll leave that on the screen, and I'll bid everyone farewell for today. Thanks everyone again for joining. Thanks to our guests for your wonderful presentations. Cheers, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.